The rain had been falling since dawn, the kind that soaked through clothes and moods alike. Inside the small cafe, everything smelled of fresh bread and burnt coffee, warm and orderly, protected from the gray chaos outside. Lena wiped the counter for the third time in a minute, more from nerves than necessity. It had been a long shift already, and the manager's eyes followed every move she made, sharp and impatient, as if he were waiting for her to make a mistake. The bell above the door jingled, and a gust of cold air swept in. An old man stepped inside, hesitating just past the threshold. Water dripped from the brim of his worn hat, ran down the sleeves of his threadbare coat, and pooled quietly on the tiled floor. His shoes were cracked and soaked through, leaving dark prints behind him. A few customers glanced up, their expressions tightening with irritation. One woman shifted her chair away as if poverty were contagious. The manager noticed immediately. Lena saw his jaw clench as he leaned toward her and whispered, "Don't encourage that. He'll order nothing and sit all day." His voice was low but sharp, carrying authority and warning. Lena nodded automatically, but her eyes stayed on the old man. He looked smaller somehow, hunched against more than just the cold, clutching his head in trembling hands as if unsure whether he was allowed to exist in this warm, bright place. The old man cleared his throat and took a tentative step forward. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice nearly drowned by the hiss of the espresso machine. May I just warm up for a moment?" He didn't even ask for coffee. Just warmth. Lena felt something twist in her chest. She remembered her grandfather, long gone now, who used to stand at bus stops in the winter, pretending not to feel the cold so others wouldn't pity him. Without thinking, she grabbed a clean towel from behind the counter and walked toward the man. "Please," she said gently, smiling as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "You're soaking wet." She handed him the towel, careful not to touch him too abruptly. His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with gratitude so deep it almost hurt to see. She guided him to a small table near the radiator, the one no one liked because it was slightly crooked. Pulling out the chair, she helped him sit. Water dripped onto the floor beneath him, but Lena didn't mind. She rushed back to the counter, poured a cup of hot tea, added a slice of lemon, and slipped a sugar packet onto the saucer. She paid for it herself without checking the price. When she set the cup in front of him, steam rose between them like a promise. The old man wrapped his hands around it, sighing as warmth seeped into his fingers. "Thank you," he murmured. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," Lena replied quietly. From behind the counter, the manager watched, his face darkening. He marched over, his shoes striking the floor with clipped anger. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "We have rules. This isn't a shelter." Lena straightened. "He's just cold," she said, keeping her voice calm. "I paid for the tea." "That's not the point," the manager snapped, glancing at the other customers as if they were a jury. "You're distracting people. Look around. This affects the atmosphere." The old man began to rise, embarrassed. "I can go," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "No," Lena said at once, placing a hand on the table. "Please, stay. Finish your tea." The manager's eyes narrowed. "We'll talk after your shift." The rest of the hours dragged by like wet wool. Lena served orders, wiped tables, and smiled on command, but the weight of the manager's anger pressed on her back. When closing time came, he called her into the storage room. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as he delivered the words flatly, almost casually. She was fired for disobeying instructions and damaging the cafe's image. Lena removed her apron in silence, her hands shaking. As she stepped outside into the rain, jobless and confused, she wondered how something that felt so right could end so wrong. Morning came too quickly. Lena woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window, softer than the night before but persistent, as if the sky itself refused to move on. For a few seconds, she lay still, disoriented, reaching automatically for her phone to check the time before remembering there was no shift to rush to. The realization settled heavily in her chest. She was unemployed. She sat up slowly in her small apartment, the kind with thin walls and furniture bought secondhand. The uniform from the cafe hung over the back of a chair, neatly folded the way she always kept it, even though she no longer had any reason to. Lena stared at it longer than she meant to, replaying the manager's words in her head. Damaging the image. The phrase made her laugh bitterly. What image was kinder than warmth on a cold day? After a simple breakfast of dry toast and tea, she began calculating numbers she already knew would not add up. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Utilities, groceries, transportation, Each thought tightened the knot in her stomach. She considered calling her mother, then decided against it. She didn't want pity, not yet. Just before noon, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. For a moment, she thought of ignoring it, assuming it was another reminder she couldn't afford. Something made her answer. "Hello," she said cautiously. "Is this Lena Morozova?" The voice on the other end was calm, measured, with a tone that suggested certainty rather than curiosity. "Yes," Lena replied, her heart beginning to beat faster. "Speaking. This is Victor Hale from Northbridge Cafe Group," the voice continued. "I'd like you to come to the cafe where you worked yesterday. As soon as possible." Her first reaction was confusion, followed closely by a flicker of hope she didn't trust. "Why?" she asked. "I was fired." "Yes," the man said. "I'm aware. Please come anyway." The call ended before she could ask anything else. Lena stared at the phone in her hand, wondering if this was some kind of mistake or, worse, a cruel form of follow-up discipline. Still, she dressed quickly, choosing her cleanest sweater, and stepped back into the damp streets. When she reached the cafe, something felt different immediately. The lights were on, brighter than usual, and the door stood wide open despite the chill. Inside, the staff were gathered near the counter instead of working, their faces tense and uncertain. Conversations hushed as Lena walked in. The manager was there too, standing stiffly with his hands clasped in front of him. He shot Lena a sharp look, equal parts irritation and unease, but said nothing. That alone made her nervous. Then she saw him. The old man from the day before stood near the window, no longer hunched or dripping. He wore a tailored dark suit that fit him perfectly, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His hair was neatly combed, and his posture was straight, commanding without effort. Yet when his eyes met Lena's, the warmth she recognized was still there. She stopped short, her breath catching. The man stepped forward slowly, and the room seemed to tilt toward him. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice the same gentle tone, now carrying undeniable authority. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Lena." The staff exchanged glances. The manager's face drained of color. "I believe you've all met me under different circumstances," the old man continued, turning slightly to address everyone. "Yesterday, I came here wet, cold, and unremarkable. Today, I come as the owner of Northbridge Cafe Group." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone gasped quietly. The manager's mouth opened, then closed again. The old man, Victor, Lena realized, looked directly at the manager. "I often visit my cafes unannounced," he said calmly. "Not to test coffee or decor, but character. I wanted to see how my employees treat those who offer nothing in return." Silence fell like a held breath. Victor turned back to Lena. "You offered warmth without being asked. You paid from your own pocket. You treated me like a human being." His eyes softened. "For that, you were punished." The manager tried to speak, stammering about policies and standards, but Victor raised a hand. "Policies that punish kindness or failures of leadership." He paused, letting the words sink in. Lena felt dizzy, caught between disbelief and a rising sense of justice she hadn't expected to feel so soon. "I called you back," Victor said to her, "because people like you are the reason this business should exist at all." Lena swallowed hard, her eyes burning. For the first time since the previous night, the weight in her chest began to lift, replaced by something fragile and bright, possibility. The silence that followed Victor's words felt almost physical, pressing against the walls of the cafe. No one moved. The espresso machine clicked softly as it cooled, the only sound in a room full of stunned people. Lena stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, unsure where to look or what to say. Part of her still expected someone to laugh and announce it was all a misunderstanding. Victor broke the silence by turning toward the manager. His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it now. "You dismissed an employee for showing compassion," he said. "You embarrassed a guest, and you defended your actions by hiding behind rules that were never meant to erase humanity." He paused, letting his gaze settle. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of your position." The manager's face flushed deep red. "Sir, please," he said, his confidence crumbling. "I was only trying to protect the brand." "Customers. The brand is not the furniture or the floor," Victor interrupted gently. "It is the people who walk through the door." He gestured toward the staff. Both sides of the counter. There was nothing left to argue. The manager nodded stiffly, gathered his coat, and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft chime that felt final. Victor turned back to the group, his expression easing. This cafe needs leadership that understands why we serve, he said. Then he faced Lena fully. Lena, I would like you to take over as manager, starting today. The words landed like a wave. Lena blinked, certain she had misheard. Me, she whispered. I've never managed anything. You managed dignity yesterday, Victor replied. Skills can be taught, character cannot. A quiet ripple of approval moved through the staff. One of the cooks smiled. A barista nodded encouragingly. Lena felt her knees weaken as the reality of it began to settle. Fear rose first, sharp and immediate, followed closely by disbelief, then something stronger, determination. Victor placed a set of keys in her hand, cool and heavy. These belong to you now. I'll remain available if you need guidance, but this cafe is yours to run. As the staff slowly returned to their stations, Lena stood behind the counter, still in her sweater instead of a uniform, trying to absorb the shift in her life that had happened in less than 24 hours. She took a deep breath and looked around. The cafe was the same space it had always been, yet it felt entirely different. Her first decision came quickly. She walked to the door and flipped the sign to open, even though it was earlier than usual. Then she straightened the crooked table near the radiator instead of hiding it away. When a young mother entered with a sleepy child, Lena greeted her with a warmth that surprised even herself. Throughout the afternoon, Victor remained quietly in the background, observing without interfering. Lena watched how people responded when kindness was no longer treated like a violation. Customers lingered longer, conversations softened, tips increased without anyone noticing how or when it happened. At one point, Lena found herself standing exactly where the old man had stood the day before. She smiled at the memory. That single moment of choice, so small, so ordinary, had reshaped everything. As evening approached, Victor prepared to leave. Before stepping out, he paused beside Lena. Remember, he said softly, success is not measured by who you turn away, but by who feels safe enough to stay. When the door closed behind him, Lena looked around the cafe, now glowing under warm lights and quiet laughter. She tied on a fresh apron, feeling its weight differently this time. She was no longer just serving coffee. She was setting the tone. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, Lena stood taller, certain now that kindness, once punished, had become her greatest strength.